Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves not only in the text that's written down in a book before us, but also to immerse ourselves in the text of the relationships that we weave together with one another in this moment of learning and studying and sharing with one another. We are in Parshat Nitzavim, and if you have a copy of the Chumash, a copy of a Bible before you, you can find it in the book of Deuteronomy, beginning with chapter 29, verse 9. And what we'll do is I'll invite you in just a moment, if you'd like to unmute, and together we can say our blessing for this opportunity to share Torah with one another. And then we'll read through the English translation of our Torah portion. I will read the first few verses, and then I'll offer other people an opportunity to read some verses as well. And at the conclusion of our reading the English translation, I'll share with you a little bit of focus study, and then we'll open it up for everyone to have the opportunity to share his or her views and thoughts and reflections about this week's Torah portion. So if you'd like to go ahead and unmute, we can share together our blessing for studying Torah. Baruch
Adonai melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah.
Thank you, God, for this opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. And now, if you'd like to go ahead and go back onto mute, we'll begin the reading of our portion. Let me share with you these opening verses. You are standing today, all of you, before Adonai, your God, the heads of your tribes, your elders, and your officers, all those of Israel, your small children, your women, and your proselyte who is in the midst of your camp, from the hewer of your wood to the drawer of your water, for you to pass into the covenant of Adonai your God, and into God's imprecation that Adonai your God seals with you today, in order to establish you today as a people to God, and that God be a God to you, as God spoke to you and as God swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Not with you alone do I seal this covenant and this imprecation, but with whoever is here standing with us today before Adonai our God, and with whoever is not here with us today. We're now on verse 15. And Dave, Leb, would you like to read a little bit starting there?
Sure. Well, you know that we dwelt in the land of Egypt, and that we passed through the midst of various other nations, and have seen the detestable things and the fetishes of wood and stone, silver and gold that they keep. Perchance there is among you some man or woman, or some clan or tribe whose heart is even now turning away from the Lord our God to go and worship the gods of those nations. Perchance there is amongst you a stock sprouting poison weed and wormwood. When such a one hears the words of these sanctions, he may fancy himself immune, thinking, I shall be safe, though I follow my own willful heart, to the utter ruin of moist and dry alike.
Thank you so much, Dave. Let me invite Margot. Would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 19?
Sure, thank you. The Lord will never forgive him. Rather will the Lord's anger and passion rage against that man till every sanction recorded in this book comes down upon him, and the Lord blots out his name from under heaven. The Lord will single them out from all the tribes of Israel's for misfortune in accordance with all the sanctions of the covenant recorded in this book of teaching. And later generations will ask the children who succeed you, and, you know, 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 and, and foreigners who come from distant lands and see plagues and disease that the Lord has inflicted upon the land. All its soil devastated by sulfur and salt beyond sowing and producing, no grass growing in it, just like the upheaval of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zebulun, which the Lord overthrew in his fierce anger. All nations will ask, why did the Lord do thus to this land? Wherefore that awful wrath? They will be told, because they forsook the covenant that the Lord God and their fathers made with them when he freed them from the land of Egypt. They turned up to the service of the other gods and worshiped them, gods whom they had not experienced, whom he had not allotted to them. So the Lord was incensed at all the land brought upon it and all the curses recorded in this book. The Lord uprooted them from their soil in anger, fury, and great wrath, and cast them into another land, as is still the case.
Thank you so much, Margot. Mark Thompson, would you like to read a little bit beginning at the next verse there?
I'm going to pass tonight. I've got a pocket book version of the Tanakh,
Okay.
which I can hardly read.
Okay.
So please
Thank
let
you, Mark.
someone else. Thank you.
Okay. So Jim, would you like to read a little bit?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Concealed acts concerned Adonai our God, but with overt acts, it is for us and our children ever to apply all the provisions of this teaching. When all these things befall you, the blessings and the curse that I have set before you, and you take them to heart amidst the various nations to which the Adonai your God has banished you, and you return to Adonai your God, and you and your children heed his command with all your heart and soul, just as I enjoin upon you this day. Then Adonai your God will restore your fortunes and take you back in love. He will bring you together again from all the peoples where Adonai your God has scattered you. Even if your outcasts are at the ends of the world, from there Adonai your God will gather you. From there he will fetch you. And Adonai your God will bring you to the land that your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And he will make you more prosperous and more numerous than your fathers. Then Adonai your God will open up your heart and the hearts of your offspring to love Adonai your God with all your heart and soul, in order that you may live.
Thank you so much. Miriam, would you like to read a little bit this evening? We're now on verse 7 of chapter 30.
I just have my plout. Does that work?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay. The Lord your God will inflict all those curses upon the enemies and foes who persecuted you. You, however, will heed the Lord and obey all his commandments, which I enjoin upon you this day. And the Lord your God will grant you abounding prosperity in all your undertakings, in the issue of your womb, the offspring of your cattle, and the produce of your soil. For the Lord will again delight in your well-being as he did in that of your fathers. Since you will be heeding the Lord your God and keeping his commandments and laws that are recorded in the book of the teaching, once you return to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Let me invite Steve or Sherry. Would you like to read a little bit at our next verse there?
Thank you, Rabbi. Surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us, that we may observe it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us, that we may observe it? No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart to observe it.
Thank you. Sherry, would you like to read a little bit?
See, I set before you this day life and prosperity, death and adversity. For I command you this day to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, his laws, and his rules, that you may thrive and increase, and that the Lord your God may bless you in the land that you are about to enter and possess. But if your heart turns away and you give no heed, and you are lured into worship and service of other gods, do you want me to continue?
Sure.
I declare to you this day that you shall certainly perish, and you shall not long endure on the soil that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess.
Thank you. Let me invite Paul. Would you like to read a little bit there at our last couple of verses, starting with 19?
Yes, Rabbi. 19. I call heaven and earth today to bear witness against you. I have placed life and death before you, blessing and curse, and you shall choose life, so that you will live, you and your offspring, to love Hashem your God, to listen to his voice, and to cleave to him. For he is your life and the length of your days, to dwell upon the land that Hashem swore to you, to your forefathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them.
Thank you so much. That is our Torah portion for this week. I'd like to share with you a little bit of focus study, which if you have a copy of the study sheet that was both mailed out and posted on Facebook, you can follow along. And at the very top is a painting by the Israeli artist Yoram Ra'anan, and he calls it Nitzavim. And his little statement about his work is immediately underneath the painting, where it says, "We have been blessed to have returned to our land where past, present, and future are meeting." So first of all, we'll see in a moment why his particular comment emerges, if you will, out of the very text that we've read. What I do want to point out about the painting, first of all, there are these very rich and spectacular colors, beginning with these hues of purple that emerge at the very bottom of the painting, and at the top of the painting, these bright blues and greens and yellows. And if you look carefully, in the middle of the painting, and then just to the right of the axis that would would be in the middle of the painting, just to the right there, there's about in my version, it's about an inch long. There's part of the canvas that's not a painting. They are photographs that he placed on the canvas, and they're photographs of the Western Wall of the Kotel. So this is his notion here of how he's bringing together something that looks quite eternal, something that's evocative of the past, and something that is more of the present with in the form of those photographs. So he's wrapped together something that is past, present, and future, and all on one canvas. I've entitled our study session "In Our Hands," and I'd like to begin by looking at the opening verse of our Torah portion, which is number 1 on the study sheet. "You are standing here today, all of you, with whoever is standing here with us today, and with whoever who is not with us today." Yeah. So usually when we turn to our commentaries about this particular verse, much of the commentary focuses on this notion about what does it mean to say that this covenant is being entered into both with people who are present in the moment and people who are not present in the moment. And so the interpretation takes the notion that all of us in some way were present at this moment at Mount Sinai, this moment of covenant that Moses is relating here. And so it's not just a matter of having been physically present, but it's an inheritance. Our presence is a matter of inheritance. I want to focus on something slightly different that emerges from this opening verse. And to do that, I'd like to just take a step back and review the different times that there's been mentioned in the Torah about a covenant. And that's what I cover here in number 2. So under number 2, where it says covenant, I have a verse from book of Genesis. And as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your offspring after you. This is a covenant that God enters into with Noah. And there's not much that seems to be either expected of Noah, and there's no particular way in which Noah himself memorializes this covenant. What is expected of Noah explicitly in the text is that he's not to murder anyone. And Jewish tradition has elicited from this particular section that there were a series of obligations called the Noahide laws, 7, that have to do with basic human civilization. You don't murder someone, you don't steal from someone, and so forth. So this is our first expression of a covenant. And then the second one is a little bit later in the book of Genesis. Walk before me and have integrity. I will grant my covenant between me and you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout the generations as an eternal covenant. This is the covenant that God enters into with Abraham. And here something is expected from Abraham, and that is this ritual of Brit Milah, the circumcision. And so Abraham enters into a rather specific covenant that takes upon the covenant that Noah entered into, as well as some additional expectations from Abraham. And then the next time is the series of verses, the verse below from the book of Exodus. Now, if you listen well to my voice and guard my covenant, you shall be to me the most beloved treasure of all peoples. Well, this is the covenant that occurs at Mount Sinai. It's a covenant that God enters into with the entire Israelite nation. And here, not only is it incorporating the aspects of covenant that preceded them, now an additional set of expectations is laid upon the Israelites. And according to tradition, that's in the form of 613 commandments. The notion here is that now the Israelites are about to incorporate this sense of being in relationship with God, this covenant with God, into every aspect of everyday life. And that's what the 613 commandments represent. So now we come to this week's Torah portion, and we go back to our opening set of verses. All of you are standing here today before Adonai, your God, to enter into the covenant of Adonai, your God. One of the ways in which this expression of the covenant is very significantly different from the preceding ones is that this is not being expressed in God's voice. This is being expressed by Moses. And so what is happening here in the book of Deuteronomy is that Moses, seemingly of his own initiative, renews this covenant between the Israelite people and God. So there's a shift that's occurring in our portion. It's part of the overall thrust of the book of Deuteronomy, which is that there's a shift from divine initiative to human initiative. It's as if Moses is saying that God is now handing over the reins of history to you. And so there's a move into the realm of human responsibility and initiative, away from the dependence that the Israelite people have been experiencing prior to this moment in the wilderness. If you have study sheet I invite you to turn over, we explore this a little bit more deeply. Because we read this portion, Nitzavim, this expression that is now being articulated by Moses, which is basically saying, you are now going to be the ones in charge. The initiative is now in your hands. You are now transitioning from a moment where God is taking care of everything for you into which you're now going to be responsible for taking care of everything. And we read this portion as we get ready for the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, a new year, a new beginning. And as these readings make clear, both from Torah and as we'll see in a moment from the Haftorah reading, this new beginning is one that's in our hands. So in number 3, we have the Haftorah reading, which is for this week's portion of Nitzavim. And it's a reading from the prophet Isaiah. And I share with you these excerpts from the Haftorah for Parshat Nitzavim. Adonai has anointed me. God has sent me as a herald of joy to the humble, to bind up the wounded of heart, to proclaim release to the captives, liberation to the imprisoned, to provide for the mourners of Zion, to give them splendor instead of ashes, oil of joy instead of mourning, a cloak of praise instead of a dim spirit. They will rebuild ancient ruins, restore wastelands of old. They will renew ruined cities, generations of desolation. And this essentially is the message that Moses is conveying in the moment of our portion to the people of Israel. That the people, as they get ready to cross over from dependence to responsibility, from wandering to settling in. This is both a national mission and it's also a personal mission for each one of us to cross over from our wandering in the wilderness, if you will, of adolescence, of irresponsibility, of childhood, into the adult world, where if we're going to settle in this promised land, this land of promise, means that we need to become responsible for the world around us. I want to share with you in number 4, a beautifully succinct way that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has articulated this message. And he wrote, faith is not waiting for God. Faith is the realization that God is waiting for us. It's a message that I believe Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel also emphasized time and time again, that God is in search of us, waiting for us to step forward and assume the destiny that is ours to grab, that of one of responsibility and human initiative. In this case, he puts it this way: awe rather than faith is the cardinal attitude of the religious Jew. And I think what he means here by awe is not just a sense of how beautiful and magnificent the world is. I think here he's referring to the kind of awe that made the Israelites tremble at that moment at Mount Sinai when they entered into the covenant with God. Because what they became aware of was that they were now being expected to assume great responsibility for their own lives, the lives of the people around them, and for the world as a whole. So it's an awareness. The message here is one of awareness of our power and the responsibility that comes with it. The recognition that our world is in our hands. With that, I'd love to open it up and hear what other thoughts were going through your minds, how you responded to this week's Torah portion, and thoughts and questions that you may have had as we were reading through our material. If you'd like to raise your hand, I'd love to call upon you and hear what you'd like to share with us. Paul, please.
Yeah, I'll take the bait. I'll be the first. But it reminds me a little bit of what we're into today, where let's say in Afghanistan, those folks they went through a bunch of wars. You know, the British, I guess the Russians, us, and now suddenly they won. And now they've inherited what they fought for. But on the other hand, they're completely unprepared. Apparently, the street, they don't even have food to eat. There's nobody out there going to a farm. And I think what we're seeing here is that God and Moses, they have a similar problem. You know, you're gonna take over, but now how do you prepare these people to take over?
Okay, thank you. Someone else want to share? Go ahead, Richard.
Well, along the same line, last week, I said that I thought the book was different. This book is different than the other books. And indeed, all the first three covenants you mentioned are all God speaking. And this one in 29:13, it's clearly Moses speaking. And my translation says, with us today and our God. And I think that this was read, this book was read when they came back to rebuild the temple. And it's real now. We're across here and the temple's been taken down. We got to do this ourselves now. And I think that's why the voice is Moses's and not God's. And it pertains to what's going on now. You've got a group that took their country and they're really going to have to get it together. And the other thing I noted was that two things. One, that the wood chopper and the water drawer in my translation, it just, you know, those are both working class people. That's proletariat work. That dawned on me. And it was also akin to what the Zen masters say. Before enlightenment, what do? You chop wood and carry water. What do you do after enlightenment? Chop wood and carry water. And they have a lot of wood to continue to chop and a lot of water to continue to draw now that they're in the land, which is calling on them to do some work. And the last question I have is from 30:16, keep in his ways, keep his commandments, his laws, and his norms. And I don't know any Hebrew, so I don't know what those three words mean and what they're referring to and why there are three. What is the difference between laws, norms, and commandment? And is it all about just being ethical and doing the right thing?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And let me invite Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Rabbi. I wanted to go back to the painting.
Okay.
Because I think it expresses very well the intention of this parashah, in that right in the middle of the painting with the photographs, you have an expression of concreteness. It's in the present and you can't avoid paying attention to it, whereas everything surrounding the photographs you could consider to be part of the past or part of the future. And to me, it just brings home the idea that it's not out there, it's there within us, as it says in one of the final verses, that it's close to you. And I think the painting is a very excellent depiction of that thought.
Thank you. Let me just, well, I'll get back to a point in just a moment, but let me call upon David Phillips. Go ahead.
I prefer you responded to Mark.
I went to the nose.
Well, Mark was taking us back to the verse about how it's not distant from you, it's close to you, it's actually within you. And one of the Hebrew words that comes up towards the end there that expresses that, it talks about, I actually closed my Chumash already, so I don't have quick access to it, but the Hebrew word there is devekut. Devekut means to attach. In modern Hebrew, we get a version of devekut, which means glue. So it's a real adherence, a literal, physical, sensual adherence and attachment. And within the Hasidic tradition, the notion of devekut is one of the highest aspirations that we should have, which is to be so thoroughly attached to the source of all life, it's almost impossible to see any daylight between oneself and the source of all life. It is that stuck. There's that level of being stuckness to one another. So that's how close it is. It is as if we are stuck to the source of all life. That's how close we should be, and that's how close we can be if we follow this path. We adhere, as Richard says, to these ethical norms, to these ritual norms, these behavioral norms. They will increasingly have us experience this sense of close attachment. So now, David Phillips, and then I'll get to Cheryl.
So I stumbled over an anachronism back in chapter 29, verse 27, where it says, Adonai's anger flared at the land, brought every curse that's been written upon the land, and plucked them, the people, I guess, from the land in anger and fury and in great rage. And he threw them into another land, as is the case today. Well, when Richard spoke about this book being read upon the return from the exile, and how it spoke to everyone about us in a human voice saying, our God, and we have to live this life, us now, today. And what Mark said, and what you said also about the immediacy of Devkut, of what this teaching is, makes that anachronism, in the sense that some people would argue it proves that it wasn't written by Moses, nonetheless, a really full and vibrant picture for me. And it just transformed that sort of skepticism or skeptic's attitude towards the text into something bigger and deeper.
What do you think that something bigger and deeper might be, David?
The bigger and deeper says, what I'm reading, these magic words that I'm reading right now are real and alive right now for me, right here. And so what if it means it was right now and right here for somebody 2,400 years ago, or whatever it was? That just proves it, that this is a magic text that on every reading brings alive spirituality and connection to the infinite in the people experiencing these words at that moment.
So I think that's part of the artistic brilliance of Yoram Ra'anan with his painting here, because he could have painted a scene that would have caused us to kind of step back and look on something that once existed, that was having us look at a historical vista, if you will. And instead, what he's done is he's messed up our capacity to be detached, have that level of detachment, by putting these photographs in there, by bringing us, oh, we're in the present, we're in the past, and then with this beautiful sky that goes on forever and ever, we're also in the future. So he brings together all those dimensions of temporality, of timelessness, if you will. And so we're part of that vista in some way. And I guess we can choose if we want to focus on the detached historical aspect of the vista, or if we want to place ourselves in the framework that he's seeking and experiencing, which is the timelessness of it all, that we're in this moment, and this moment is within us as well. So thank you for bringing all that up. And let me go to Cheryl, and then I'll get to Mark Levinstein. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Oh, you mean, oh, Cheryl.
Thank you, Rabbi. What David said ties into what I had been thinking, it's particularly about the language, and they're talking about faith. Because, and I'm trying to remember the name of the author, and if I said it, you all would know who he is, but he talks about the 3 Abrahamic religions. And he gives to Christianity the primary idea of faith. That once you believe in Jesus, then it's all over. I mean, that's all you need to do. It's just to believe in Jesus and you're saved, and that's it. Done. You don't have to do anything else. And for us, it is an ongoing commitment. It is an acceptance every day of the obligations, whether or not you believe in God or not, that you act these things. And it is the past, the future, and the present for us. And not talking about heaven, not talking about hell. It's just talking about us as part of a stream of people that has a past, a present, and a future. And it's not necessarily from descendants, literally, but it is our descendants as a Jewish people. So I see this very broadly. And actually, when I look at the painting, I see the photographs as a harsh reminder that it's not all beautiful, and it may not always be beautiful. And the past wasn't all beautiful by any means. And the present isn't all beautiful. So it's not really saying that you're going to have peace and beauty. It's saying this is our world, and this is the one we live in, and you need to act accordingly.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you. That's very beautiful. And let me call Mark Levinstein, and then I'll get up to Sherry up there. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I just wanted to share my perspective. I'm mesmerized by the painting. And I think what keeps coming back to me is the photographs almost appear like a vessel, a barge, an ark, the TARDIS, whatever, if you will, in the midst of the eternity. Just wanted to.
So say a little bit more about that, about it being an ark and a vessel.
It just, it's the present. It's a potential within the present in the realm of our past experiences and then future opportunities.
Lovely.
How it comes across to me, and I kept looking at it, and I see the wall, but I see a vessel, and just throughout it, there's so many opportunities to focus and think about and ponder,
And that's to see.
Yeah, it just opens. It's a very successful painting in giving us, I think, all of us opportunities to see so many different things.
I love your word opportunity, because nothing is guaranteed, right? It's in our hands. It's an opportunity. So thank you for bringing that perspective. Let me invite Sherry. Did you want to share something?
Well, just a couple of things, just a question and actually 2 questions. I was reading over the comment, the reference to Genesis and the word integrity. And I think I've struggled with what it means to have integrity, and what we consider integrity now may change over time, historically and in the future. So it, someone else said, well, they don't read Hebrew. I would be interested to know, what the context of integrity and the Hebrew meaning of it, and what it means to have integrity in Genesis, where the reference that they're making there. And the other question I had was, I really appreciated the comments about, I'll be okay. And I juxtapose that with integrity, because I've always felt that if a person has integrity, that they will be okay, and maybe not be granted what they want, but you'll be okay if you've made it a conscious choice to live with integrity in your life.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I just looked it up in the text real quickly. The word that's translated on my study sheet as integrity is tamim, which really can either mean perfect, or it can mean perhaps something about innocence or naivete even. But for me, there's a notion in which it's having to do with one's unadulterated essence, if you will. And so maybe it has something to do with, if you walk with me, you won't be all encumbered with all of these things that we encloak ourselves with, all these defenses and all these distortions that we twist ourselves into in order to try and be successful in the world and so forth. That if you walk with me, you'll return, if you will, back to the purity of who you really are, which is as a loving aspect of the source of life. So thank you for bringing us to that point. Jay, Jay Iser, would you like to share something?
Thank you, Rabbi. I enlarged the picture to my full screen on my desktop here. There seems to be a fowl, a bird of some kind, at about, if you're looking in the middle of the painting, it's at about 10 o'clock over to the left. And there's also an Escher aspect to this painting. If anyone's familiar with Escher, these objects, these spirits, these beings in the sky continue onward endlessly and come down even on ethereally on the land they make like a loop in the sky, a fill the sky in flocks. But what I also see is that there is some precision as far as the blocks from which the temple was so laboriously built. There's also the land, which if anyone's flown over our land or another land, there's these geometrical grids of people, of civilization tilling the land and making order out of it. But that's not where the action is happening in this painting right now. The action in this painting is what is out there? What is the purpose of doing all of these endeavors? Where is it in context? And I believe that the artist has put our endeavors and those of our forebears and those to come into a past, present, and future, essentially an Escher endless loop. And I can look at it, I believe, with awe rather than with faith or hope or anything else. That's what I get out of it. I could say this is the most pessimistic or the most optimistic, but basically I'm just in awe of it. And there's a phrase that comes to mind, and I don't know, it just popped into my head, and it's, let go, let go, let God. There's something greater than, much, much greater than any of us or anything we've created in charge here.
So very beautiful, Jay. Thank you so much. By bringing up Escher, what you have brought into the conversation is that perspective of Escher's, which seeks to defy our sense of certainty about where things begin and where things end, about where the borders are. And he challenges our notion of the geometry of it all. And so perhaps that is what is happening here in the painting. And in the message that we're getting from Torah as well, this, especially with this notion of devikut, of attachment, that the notion of our singularity on the one hand is both real and unavoidable and also an illusion. So thank you very much for bringing that all in. Let me call upon Gary, and then I'll go over to Richard. Gary?
I wanted to comment on verse 6. If I could just reread it, it's short. Then the eternal your God will open up your heart and the hearts of your offspring to love the eternal your God with all your heart and soul in order that you may live. I just wanted to share that one of the most profound things that I get from Torah is that balancing act between your heart and your soul, or what I usually say, my heart and my brain. My default is always my heart, but I'm learning that sometimes that's not sometimes you have to not default, but you have to use your brain a little bit more. On this particular one though, in order to let Adonai in, you need both. I just found it very, very profound because it's a balancing act. And that line just spoke out to me.
Thank you so much, Gary. Those are words of wisdom about the need to have a sense of balance of heart and mind, of one's analytical ability and one's also impassioned sense. So thank you very much. It's very beautiful. Thank you for taking us back to that verse. Richard?
Yes, I was just thinking that, this week with the storm that you're in, and what's going on in Afghanistan, and what's going on with the electioneering, everything, the existential problem of having humans govern themselves in an ethical way and being unable to is flat in our face this week. And it's always there. And the discussion makes me wonder that at a time like this, does it make us really cleave even stronger to our connection with the spirit or divinity or God or whatever it is? Because the more, and that's Isaiah 2, the more that's put upon us, the more tsuris that we bear, the more thankful we have that we're able to carry it. And whether or not there is a future or a past, or whether there's any such thing as time, kind of becomes irrelevant, because we have this opportunity to cleave even more strongly and more devoutly.
Richard, I like your use of the word cleave in English because it has this wonderful ambiguous sense, right? Yes. Cleave can either mean to cut, to separate, or it can mean to attach oneself to.
And you stick close to the blade.
So, and how we manifest that power is, in fact, in our hands, right? Whether we're going to continue to say, I'm the one in charge of my life and I'm the one that counts, or whether we're going to recognize our accountability to others and to use our power to gain a greater sense of adherence, collectivity, sense of responsibility, or whether we're going to continue to isolate ourselves and care only for ourselves, which leads to a form of death. So thank you so much.
Adherence is cleaving.
Yes, thank you. Beautiful. And anyone else? Thank you. Susan, and then back to Mark Levinstein. Yeah, Susan.
So Sherry, I have in front of me Robert Alter's translation of Tanakh, and he tried to be very literal in his translation. And I thought you might like what he wrote, how he translated integrity was walk in my presence and be blameless.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Very clever.
Mark Levinstein.
I just wanted to share a resource. I was so intrigued by the artist that I Googled him, and he has his lovely website, yoramhernan.com. And interesting to quote him, a good painting is one that opens a pathway to a place I never knew existed.
Could you say it one more time?
a good painting is one that opens a pathway to a place I never knew existed.
Tell me how that affects you and what you think of it.
Well, I think maybe that's in part what I was trying to express, or several of us were trying to express as we were talking about the painting and its impact on us and what it afforded us.
Yeah, I think he's offering up this as an invitation, right?
Yes.
As an invitation to leave behind our sense of detachment and isolation, frozenness of spirit, and to enter into another dimension and to experience something that holds out great promise. And that's where the Israelites are in this moment when Moses is taking the initiative that's never been done before as a human being to renew this covenant. It's something that will happen again and again and again in the Bible. It'll happen again in the book of Joshua. It'll happen again in the second book of Kings. It'll happen again in the second book of Chronicles, where human beings will take on the responsibility for renewing the covenant. It's what Ezra and Nehemiah do when the exiles return from Babylon. They read the Torah, they read this teaching out loud, and thereby renew this covenant. So that's, I think, the great promise that's before us. The promise isn't just to be living in a land where it has good soil and good trees and bountiful fruit. The real promise is that we will now have an opportunity, as Mark said so beautifully, we'll have an opportunity to fulfill what is our purpose, which is to assume responsibility for this world in which we find ourselves. So with that, I'd like to, in preparation for Rosh Hashanah that's coming up, I'm so proud and grateful to be sharing this world with all of you and all the goodness that you bring to it and all your sense of responsibility. You each make the world a much better place, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you all very much. God bless you all. Be well. L'shana tova.
Thank you,
Shana Tova,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.